The paradox they don't want you to understand. Have you noticed how the person who seems content alone draws crowds, while the one desperately seeking connection repels everyone? How the individual who withholds attention becomes the center of obsession, while the one who gives freely is forgotten? This isn't coincidence. It's the fundamental law of human desire that society deliberately keeps hidden from you. The world has trained you to believe that vulnerability equals strength, that neediness shows authenticity, that constant availability proves loyalty. They've sold you the lie that if you just give more, explain more, chase more, you'll finally be valued. But look at your life honestly. Has begging for attention ever earned you respect? Has explaining yourself endlessly ever made them understand? Has being available at all times ever made them appreciate your presence? The truth Machiavelli understood cuts against everything you've been taught. Power flows toward those who need nothing. Magnetism belongs to those who can walk away without flinching. Respect is given to those who refuse to explain themselves. This is the hidden architecture of human psychology. We don't desire what begs for our approval. We crave what exists independently of our validation. Think about the last time someone needed you desperately. How did it make you feel? Perhaps pity at first, then irritation, finally contempt. Their need gave you power over them, but it also made them smaller in your eyes. Now think about someone who seemed perfectly fine without you. Someone whose world kept spinning whether you were there or not. That person haunted your thoughts. You wondered what they were doing, who they were with, whether they even remembered you. Their indifference created a vacuum that your mind rushed to fill. This is the mechanism of magnetism. It operates on the principle of scarcity and perceived value. What is abundant becomes background noise. What is scarce commands attention. When you need nobody, you become the scarcest resource in a world drowning in desperation. Every relationship you've entered from a position of need has placed you at a disadvantage. You negotiated from weakness, accepted less than you deserved, tolerated disrespect, because you feared losing them more than you valued yourself. The mechanism of dependency. Most people are walking advertisements for their own desperation. Their body language screams it. Their tone begs for it. Their actions revolve around securing it. Approval, validation, attention, love. They've made these things the oxygen they breathe, and everyone around them can smell the suffocation. This is why the needy person never receives what they seek. Their hunger is too obvious, too manipulable, too easy to exploit. Consider how your own neediness has betrayed you. How many times have you texted first? Always. How often have you been the one to apologize, even when you did nothing wrong? How frequently have you rearranged your entire schedule to accommodate someone who never considered your time valuable? Each instance was a confession. You were saying, "I need you more than you need me." And in that admission, you handed them the blueprint for controlling you. The person who needs nothing reveals nothing. When you stop reaching out first, they wonder why. When you stop apologizing unnecessarily, they question whether they've done something wrong. When you stop accommodating their every whim, they suddenly realize they've been taking advantage. Your absence creates the space for them to feel your value. But presence dilutes value when it's constant and unconditional. Machiavelli would observe that the prince who depends on the love of his people is always at their mercy. But the prince who governs himself first, who could rule in solitude if necessary, commands true authority. Translate this to your personal life. The person who needs a relationship to feel complete will always be at the mercy of their partner. The person who chooses connection from a place of wholeness sets the terms. You must understand that every time you explain yourself to someone who hasn't earned that explanation, you're teaching them your internal logic. You're giving them the code to your operating system. They learn which words wound you, which silences make you uncomfortable, which accusations force you into defense mode. This is the cost of needing to be understood. You make yourself readable, and therefore controllable. The power of emotional autonomy. Watch a child throw a tantrum for a toy. The parent who gives in immediately teaches the child that tantrums work. The parent who remains unmoved teaches the child that emotional manipulation has no power here. Adults are no different. They test you constantly, probing for the emotional levers that will make you comply, explain, apologize, chase. When you react, you show them the lever works. When you remain still, you reveal there is nothing to pull. Emotional autonomy is the foundation of magnetism. It means your emotional state doesn't rise and fall with their approval or disapproval. They can praise you, and you remain centered. They can criticize you, and you remain unshaken. They can withdraw, and you continue forward. This steadiness is unnerving to those who have built their power on triggering reactions in others. Most people are emotional marionettes, dancing to strings they don't even know they're wearing. Someone insults them, and rage erupts. Someone ignores them, and anxiety spirals. Someone flatters them, and they melt into compliance. They have no center, no gravity of their own. They orbit whatever force last acted upon them. This is why they're easy to manipulate. Their emotional responses are predictable, exploitable, controllable. But when you cultivate emotional autonomy, when you anchor yourself in your own assessment of your worth, external forces lose their grip. An insult becomes information about the speaker, not about you. Being ignored becomes their loss, not your rejection. Flattery becomes suspicious rather than intoxicating. You stop being reactive and become observant. You stop being controlled and become strategic. The person who needs emotional validation from others will always twist themselves into whatever shape seems most likely to earn it. They will suppress their truth, agree when they disagree, laugh at jokes they find offensive, tolerate behavior they find unacceptable, all because the fear of losing approval outweighs the cost of losing themselves. This is not intimacy. This is servitude dressed up as connection, the strategic use of absence. There is a reason distance creates longing, while proximity often breeds contempt. Familiarity doesn't just reveal flaws, it reduces mystery to mundane detail. When someone has complete access to you, when they know exactly where you are, what you're doing, how you'll respond, you become furniture in their life. Useful, perhaps. Comfortable, maybe. But not magnetic. Not irreplaceable. Not missed until you're gone. Absence is not game playing when it comes from genuine self-prioritization. It's game playing when you pretend to be busy while obsessively checking if they've noticed. Real absence means you have a life so full, so engaging, so aligned with your purpose that others must wait their turn. You're not manipulating them with silence. You're simply living a life that doesn't revolve around their validation. Watch what happens when you become genuinely scarce. The person who took your presence for granted suddenly remembers all the things you used to do. The friend who always canceled plans last minute suddenly makes time. The partner who was distant suddenly becomes attentive. Not because you manipulated them, but because scarcity revealed value they had forgotten existed. This is why Machiavelli advises that the prince should not appear too often before his subjects. Constant visibility breeds either familiarity or contempt. Strategic absence maintains mystique. When you're always available, your appearance means nothing. When you're selective about your presence, your arrival becomes an event. People straighten up. Conversations become more intentional. Your words carry more weight because they know you might disappear again. But understand this critical distinction. Absence for its own sake is weakness disguised as strategy. True power comes from being absent because you're building something, becoming something, focused on something that matters more than their approval. When your absence is driven by a genuine purpose rather than manufactured scarcity, people sense the difference. They feel that you reign not withholding attention as a tactique curie, simply too engaged with your own evolution to orbit their drama, the discipline of non-reaction. Every reaction you give away is a piece of your power surrendered. The person who can make you angry controls you in that moment. The person who can make you anxious occupies your mind rent-free. The person who can provoke you into defensive explanations has just made you their puppet. Your strings are the predictable ways you respond to specific stimuli. The disciplined mind observes triggers without being triggered. It watches someone attempt manipulation with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing an experiment. Interesting, it notes. They're trying anger. Now they're switching to guilt. Now they're attempting flattery, but it doesn't engage. It doesn't take the bait. It remains a witness to the drama rather than an actor in it. This is not coldness. Cold is reactive, it's anger frozen in place. This is clarity. It's the ability to see the game being played without feeling compelled to play. When someone hurls an accusation designed to make you defensive, the reactive person immediately begins explaining, justifying, defending. The non-reactive person simply asks, "Why do you believe that?" Or says, "Nothing at all." The silence forces the accuser to confront the weakness of their own position. Machiavelli understood that the leader who responds immediately to every provocation will exhaust himself fighting battles on his enemy's terrain. But the leader who chooses his battles, who can absorb attacks without retaliation, who waits for the perfect moment to strike, this leader conserves his energy for victories that matter. Your life is no different. Not every accusation deserves a defense. Not every insult requires a response. Not every dramatic scene needs your participation. The world is full of people trying to provoke reactions for their own purposes. They want to see if you're still weak enough to control. They want to drag you into their emotional chaos, because misery craves company. They want to make you react, because your reaction gives them the attention they desperately seek. When you refuse to react, you deny them all of this. You force them to sit with themselves, and most people cannot tolerate that silence. The test of boundaries without explanation. A boundary defended with lengthy justification is a boundary already compromised. The moment you feel compelled to explain why you're saying no, why you're unavailable, why you're choosing differently, you've entered into a negotiation about your own sovereignty. And sovereignty, by definition, is not negotiable. Watch how people test boundaries. They push once to see if you'll hold. If you hold with uncertainty, with apologetic explanations, with wavering conviction, they know your boundary is negotiable. They'll simply apply more pressure next time. But if you hold with quiet certainty, with no explanation offered, with complete comfort in your decision, they learn. They learn that this boundary is bedrock, not sand. The person who needs you to understand their boundaries is asking permission to have them. I can't tonight because I have work early tomorrow, and I really need sleep. And I've been so tired lately, and ... Double quotes. Each word is a plea for approval. Each justification is an opening for negotiation. But it's just one night. You can sleep in tomorrow. You're not that tired. And before you know it, your boundary has been talked away because you presented it as debatable. Compare this to simple, final statements. I'm not available tonight. That's it. No explanation. No apology. No negotiation. When they ask why, you don't owe them your reasoning. You can repeat, "I'm just not available," or redirect. Is there something specific you needed? Most people are so unaccustomed to boundaries without justification that they don't know how to respond. They're waiting for the explanation they can argue against. When none comes, they're forced to respect the boundary or reveal themselves as disrespectful. Machiavelli would note that the prince who explains every decision invites his subjects to question every decision. But the prince who issues decrees without extended justification maintains the weight of authority. Your personal boundaries deserve the same respect. You are the prince of your own life. Your no is complete without elaboration. Your yes should never come with resentment, because you said it when you meant no. The magnetic person doesn't apologize for their boundaries. They don't over-explain their needs. They state their position with the calm certainty of someone who knows their own worth. And that certainty is what makes others respect those boundaries. Not the explanation, not the apology, the unwavering self-knowledge that says, "This is my standard, and I'm comfortable maintaining it regardless of your reaction." The economics of attention. In a world where everyone is screaming for attention, the person who guards theirs carefully becomes valuable by default. Your attention is currency. How you spend it determines your poverty or wealth. If you give it away to every notification, every demand, every drama, you bankrupt yourself. But if you invest it strategically in people and pursuits that compound value, you become rich in ways others can only envy. Notice how the successful, the powerful, the truly respected are notoriously difficult to reach. They don't answer every call. They don't respond to every message immediately. They don't attend every event. Their scarcity isn't Aragusi's economics. They understand that their attention is their most valuable asset, and they protect it accordingly. When they do give you their attention, you feel it. You feel seen, heard, valued, because you know it's rare. You know it's chosen. Now contrast this with the person who is always available, always responding, always making time for everyone. On the surface, this seems generous, But watch how people treat this person. They interrupt. They assume availability. They don't value the attention because it costs them nothing to access. The open door is never appreciated like the one that occasionally closes. This is why needing nobody makes you magnetic. When you don't need their validation, their approval, their attention, you naturally become more selective about where yours goes. You stop wasting energy on people who drain without reciprocating. You stop attending obligations that add nothing to your life. You stop maintaining relationships that exist only because ending them would be uncomfortable. This selectivity makes your presence valuable. When you show up, it matters. When you engage, people pay attention because you've made yourself scarce enough to be noticed. Machiavelli understood that the prince must be selective in his alliances. Every commitment carries a cost. Every relationship requires maintenance. The prince who tries to please everyone pleases no one and exhausts himself in the process. But the prince who carefully chooses his alliances, who says no to most requests, who maintains strict criteria for his time and energy, this prince commands respect because his favor is worth earning. The transformation of relationships. When you stop needing people, your relationships transform in one of two ways. Either they deepen into genuine connection based on mutual respect and choice, or they dissolve because they were always transactions dressed up as relationships. Both outcomes serve you. The first gives you real connection. The second frees you from false ones. Watch what happens in a relationship when you stop being the pursuer, when you stop initiating every conversation, planning every meet, doing all the emotional labor. If the relationship was real, the other person will notice your withdrawal and step up. They'll start initiating. They'll start investing. They'll start showing you that they value what you bring. But if the relationship was transactional, if they only engaged with you because you made it effortless for them, your withdrawal will reveal the truth. They'll do nothing. They'll let it fade, and you'll have your answer. This is the filter that non-neediness provides. It separates those who want to know you from those who want to use you. The user cannot afford your scarcity. They need you desperate, available, eager to please. Your independence threatens their access. But the genuine person will respect your boundaries. They'll value your time. They'll reciprocate your investment because they see the relationship as mutual, not one-sided. Most people stay in relationships that should end because they need not to be alone more than they need to be respected. They tolerate disrespect, neglect, even abuse because the fear of solitude outweighs the cost of staying. This is the final slavery. When you need connection so badly that you'll accept any connection, no matter how toxic, you've become a prisoner to your own loneliness. But the person who has learned to need nobody, who has built a life so full and purposeful that solitude is peaceful rather than terrifying, this person cannot be held hostage. If you disrespect them, they'll leave. If you take them for granted, they'll disappear. If you try to manipulate them, they'll cut you off. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. They know their value, and they refuse to accept treatment that contradicts it. Machiavelli wrote that it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. In modern terms, it's better to be respected than liked if you can't have both. And respect only comes when people know you have the power to walk away, when they know you don't need them more than you need your own peace, your own standards, your own dignity. That's when they treat you carefully. That's when they show up properly. That's when they stop taking you for granted. The cultivation of internal validation. Everything we've discussed collapses if you still waiting for the world to tell you you're enough. You can be absent, non-reactive, boundaried, and selective. But if internally you're still desperate for validation, people will sense it. Your actions might be right, but your energy will betray you. True magnetism requires that you genuinely not need their approval because you've built such a strong relationship with yourself that external opinions become advisory rather than necessary. This is the hardest work. Not the external behaviors of detachment, but the internal rewiring that makes those behaviors authentic. You must learn to validate yourself, to know when you've done well without needing anyone to confirm it, to feel your worth without external measurement, to find peace in your own company without entertainment or distraction. This self-sufficiency is the foundation. Without it, everything else is performance. How do you build this? By keeping promises to yourself, by achieving small goals and acknowledging your wins, by spending time alone without filling the silence with noise, by confronting your thoughts without judgment, by building skills that make you objectively valuable, by developing a purpose that exists independent of any relationship, by creating a life you don't need to escape from. When you've done this work, when you've genuinely built a fortress of self-worth that no external rejection can breach, everything changes. You stop performing confidence, you embody Italiana. You stop faking detachments, you live it. People sense the difference between someone pretending not to need approval and someone who genuinely doesn't. The pretender still has desperation leaking through their carefully constructed facade. The genuine article radiates a calm certainty that needs no announcement. Machiavelli understood that true power comes from within. The prince who depends on external circumstances, the love of the people, the strength of his army, the wealth of his treasury is vulnerable to changes in those circumstances. But the prince who has cultivated virtue, discipline, strategic thinking, and self-mastery possesses power that cannot be taken from him. Your life operates on the same principle. Build yourself into someone whose worth is undeniable to the person who matters most. The magnetic pull of self-possession. Self-possession is the ultimate aphrodisiac. In a world of desperate people, when everyone around you is anxiously seeking validation, frantically explaining themselves, desperately chasing connection, your calm centeredness becomes magnetic by contrast. You're not trying to prove anything. You're not seeking anything. You're simply present, self-contained, comfortable with who you are. This is profoundly attractive because it's profoundly rare. People are drawn to those who seem complete. Not perfect. Perfection is off, but complete. Whole. Like they've answered fundamental questions about themselves that others are still struggling with. When you interact with someone who genuinely doesn't need your approval, it's both unnerving and fascinating. You can't manipulate them with praise or punishment. You can't guilt them into compliance. You can't make them dance to your tune. They have their own music, their own rhythm, their own direction, and something in you wants to know what that's like. This is why the person who needs nobody ends up surrounded by people who want to be around them. Not because they're pursuing anyone, but because they've become worth pursuing. Not because they're giving everyone attention, but because receiving their attention feels valuable. Not because they're trying to be liked, but because their self-sufficiency makes them inherently interesting. Think about the people you've been most drawn to in your life. Chances are, they weren't the ones chasing you, explaining themselves, or seeking your validation. They were the ones who seemed perfectly fine whether you were there or not. The ones who had lives that continued with or without your participation. The ones who treated your presence as nice, but not necessary. That perceived indifference made you want to matter to them. You wanted to be the exception, the one they chose, the one who earned their attention. The final truth. Here's what they don't want you to know. Your neediness is their power over you. Every time you need someone to like you, they can manipulate you by threatening to withhold that approval. Every time you need someone to stay, they can exploit you by threatening to leave. Every time you need someone to understand you, they can control you by refusing to listen. Your needs become their leverage. But when you eliminate neediness, when you truly internalize that, you're fine alone, that you can walk away from anyone who disrespects you, that you'd rather be alone than tolerated, you become ungovernable. No one can threaten you with rejection because you're not afraid of it. No one can manipulate you with approval because you don't need it. No one can control you with guilt because you know your boundaries are justified regardless of their feelings about them. This is the freedom Machiavelli points toward. In all his writings, not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom from being controlled by what others want. The freedom that comes from self-mastery, from knowing yourself so completely that external chaos cannot shake your internal foundation. The freedom that allows you to engage with the world from a position of strength rather than weakness, choice rather than need, abundance rather than scarcity. Will this make you universally loved? No. The needy will resent you for not feeding their need for control. The manipulative will hate you for being unmanipulable. The toxic will despise you for refusing to participate in their drama. But the healthy, the strong, the self-possessed, they will respect you. They will value you. They will treat you well because they recognize in you what they've cultivated in themselves. The rare ability to need nobody while still choosing connection. This is not about becoming cold or closed off. It's not about refusing all vulnerability or connection. It's about making those things choices rather than compulsions. About offering them from a place of strength rather than weakness. About giving because you want to, not because you need their approval for giving. About connecting because someone has earned that privilege, not because you can't bear to be alone. So I ask you now, are you ready to stop needing? Are you ready to build a life so full that others must add value to be invited in? Are you ready to be misunderstood by those who can't comprehend self-sufficiency? Are you ready to lose relationships that were always about what you could provide rather than who you are? If you've read this far, something in you recognizes this truth. You're tired of chasing, tired of explaining, tired of begging for respect you should command naturally. You're ready to build the internal fortress that makes you magnetic, not by trying to attract, but by becoming someone worth being attracted to. Someone who needs nobody, and therefore everyone wants to know. The transformation won't be easy. Every instinct you've developed, every pattern you've established, every fear you've accumulated will resist this shift. But on the other side of that, resistance is a version of you that walks through the world differently, that holds their head higher, that speaks with more authority, that sets boundaries without guilt, that chooses connection without desperation, that values themselves enough to demand others do the same. This is the path Machiavelli illuminates, not the path to being loved by everyone, but the path to respecting yourself enough that you don't need to be. Not the path to easy relationships, but the path to authentic ones. Not the path to constant companionship, but the path to genuine connection. It's the path of needing nobody, so you can truly choose somebody. And that choice, made from abundance rather than scarcity, from strength rather than weakness, from self-respect rather than desperation. That choice creates relationships worth having. The world needs more people who can't be bought with flattery, controlled with guilt, or manipulated with the threat of abandonment. The world needs people who know their worth so completely that they refuse to settle for anything less than respect. The world needs you to stop needing it and start choosing it on your own terms. If this resonates, if it clarifies something you've felt but couldn't articulate, write in the comments, I choose myself. Let's see who's ready for this transformation. And don't forget, the next video will build on these principles in ways you need to see. This is just the beginning. See you there.